Good morning, class, or afternoon, or good night, whatever the case may be. Sorry, I gotta get comfortable here. I always get comfortable, it seems, after I start the video. Anyway, I want to come and bring you just a brief lecture. This is a great tie-in to what we're going to be covering for the next 3 lectures to end this unit out. You've had 2, here's a third PowerPoint, and there will be 3 more PowerPoints after this one. I hope things have been going well for you. So, given the videos you've watched, whoops, you can't see that. Which region represents a greater portion of food insecure people compared to the 1990s? So you have to recall Sarah Menker's TED Talk, and she talked about the global food crisis, and remember the way the colors flipped. So for instance, I can't bring it over. Let's see. Anyway, you had the United States here, so we consume less than we actually produce. The pink colors where they consume more than they actually produce. And we saw most of Africa. Light blue, here's China, Australia, South America. Light blue is closer to America, where the amount they consume of calories is about the amount that they produce. So they're pretty much self-sufficient. So on the 3 levels, there is importer of calories, self-sufficient in calories, or net exporter of calories. And she went on to show how, if you look at these countries, namely South Africa, or not countries, but continents, you can notice, keep an eye here in this section, keep an eye right here on this section, keep an eye here, and look at Africa. And what you might recall, boom, is the flip and switch of India to being light blue, China being from self-sufficient to dark red net importer, and then a powerhouse in agriculture has come up here in South America, and we of course are darker blue. So anyway, she gives some great statistics for why for what's happening as of late in the last 40 years. And she attempts to solve a little bit of why and how Africa can reverse this trend of going from a net importer. She gives more hope for India in its arable use of land, and how China. And of late, we know the effect the global economy has, especially with the new trade wars we have with China. They continue to begin to promise to purchase more of ours. Soybeans, corn, and such, but they immediately, almost once we shut off our supply to them and said we were not, they immediately went down here to Brazil and other places to get their food source. What I'm saying is, everyone's got to eat, and they're going to get it from somewhere if they can't make their own. And we're talking about in the millions and billion tons here of food and crops that drive the markets and world security. So we're going to talk just a little bit today about the Green Revolution, how we got started, how it happened before when the world was in a very dire situation and there was starvation and famine. Look at a little bit of history. So which region represents a greater portion of food insecure people compared to the 1990s? Latin America, Oceania, Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. So we'll look at this slide here. I'll move me up. Sorry about that. And so here we have a total of 1 billion, and here we have 795 million. This is from 1990, 1992 to near present, 2014, 2016. Look at the overall size of the circles here and in green. So you can go through here and compare to answer the question. You can see many dramatically increase. This is the changing distribution of hunger in the world, and the numbers and shares of undernourished people by region. So we're looking at undernourished people. So there's a lot less undernourished people in A, developed regions, as well as some of southern Asia. And this has to do with their own little rice revolution. We had a wheat revolution in South America. Of course, this was only going back to 1990. And so we've been increasing, been doing very well. It's just that the progress is uneven. There's more than enough calories, there's more than enough land. Production is above, but there's a lot of food waste. And I just heard on the radio a week ago about how 1/3 of our food is wasted, whether by grocery stores, restaurants, and households, due to tags such as best used by and expires when. And so a lot of people are getting rid of their food when the best used by date comes and goes. And that is not an expiration date, but nonetheless a lot of that food gets thrown out. That's just a manufacturer's date for the best quality of flavor, typically, that you can expect from their product. But also, I mean, you go to grocery stores and you go to restaurants, and we know that food is being thrown out. I shadowed or volunteered, I don't remember why I was there, to be honest, but at elementary school, and it was during lunchtime. And to get your lunch, you get the whole plate. You have to get the whole plate. You can't just buy or get only one thing. And it was these sub sandwiches, chips, and some apples or something. And sandwich after sandwich. I mean, no kid wants to eat that. I mean, they're not interested. They're not interested in that Subway sandwich. Thick old piece of bread, hardly any, thin layer of cheese, thin layer of meat. This wasn't much. I guess they're not into sandwiches. And they probably ate the fruit and drank some of the milk and just ploop, ploop, ploop. I was like, wow. I'm looking down at the trash can, and it's just full of food. And that's just one elementary. And, well, no one ever said high school or cafeteria food was the best. Anyway, Africa would be the answer to your question here. Sub-Saharan Africa. Greater portion of food insecurity. Okay, so the Green Revolution. So the term was coined in the 1960s to describe the increase of wheat, rice, and maize. This is a wonderful story. I mean, I remember growing up, and I was a kid in the 1980s, and even still we see it sometimes today, but you'd watch these videos and movies, and I remember every night on the news was about Ethiopia and the famine there, just hunger everywhere. And this one gentleman heard the cry. We're building up to this term coined in the 1960s to describe the increase of wheat. Mexico, India, Pakistan, Philippines, each of these nations dramatically increased the yields of this given crop, wheat or rice. And it was all due to the efforts, just a few particular efforts in the commercialization and mechanization of farming. So here you see wheat yieldings in developing countries from 1950 to 2004. I want you to, obviously, you can see this curve here, how it shoots up. We had up and down, but around 1,000, and around 1970, and really between 65 and 70, we had an increase, and then just dramatic increase in wheat yields. This saved millions, billions of people from starvation. This comes from the Food and Agriculture Organization. Look at this one. Number of poor who live in areas dominated by different crops. This is 2005. And again, you have South Asia. You have Southeast Asia. And then you have East Asia. You have to think about what's over there. Far edges, Sub-Saharan Africa. Comes all the way up to here. And then you have some Latin America and the Caribbean. It's a lot of people. Clearly, rice is a big crop for those. The income here is below $1.25 per day. So if we want to do something about poverty, it's clear we must invest in rice. Here, 90% of the world's rice is produced and consumed in Asia. So the Green Revolution improved varieties, such as the ones we've just talked about, in wheat. I like this picture here. If you look at it carefully and you can read through it, you have the improved wheat that was being grown in Mexico, and you have these heavy grain stalks up here, but they lodge, they tend to fall over, makes harvesting hard, and sometimes they go bad. Then you have this dwarf over here, which came from Japan. And when they crossed this larger, higher yielding wheat that they developed in Mexico with this dwarf plant from Japan, you get right here this F2 generation right in the middle, where you have a medium-sized, thicker stalk that's able to hold up the higher yielding wheat heads. This is amazing. And this development right here in plant breeding between the 1950s and 1960s is what just converted Mexico. Mexico was starving. At this time, they were a little reluctant to listen and to try new things, but they did. And within a matter of 8 to 13 years, 8 years, it became sufficient of their own. And another 13 years, they were able to actually grow enough to export. And that totally gave a boost and boom to their economy at that time and pulled them out of being on the brink of starvation for most of those people. Bread became more available. It moved then to India. They began to try it, and Africa, and it was just an amazing, amazing product. And this was kind of the start of the Green Revolution. Click on this. This could do more justice than what I could say for it right here. But you'll hear about Norman Borlaug and the Green Revolution and how it began. It's only about 8 minutes long. You need to click on that after this lecture. Improved variety, semi-dwarf, high-yielding, disease-resistant, widely adapted. As a matter of fact, disease-resistant was the first thing that they bred for. It was a red rust that grew on the stem that would kill it. And then they got a high-yielding variety, but then it could not sustain itself. It would fall over, something they call lodging. And after that, then they bred for that out of there, and they got this semi-dwarf plant like I was mentioning. And so these were some of the improved varieties. And now they had to test them across areas of Mexico, which is what they did here. And they got them in climates that, and that video goes back and talks a little bit about this, that could be grown in multiple areas around the world. And that's just what they did. So it became what we call widely adapted. Secondly, it improved the production methods. They began to use and experiment with different forms of irrigation, fertilizer use, mechanization, things that today bring a little bit of alarm because of the environment. But nonetheless, at this time, the world was at war and fighting, mostly because of food riots. We even have food riots today in the Middle East. In 2011, in the Middle East, a lot of the toppling of the government came from the dramatic increase in food prices due to the lack of food available, the access of food. So irrigation, fertilizer, mechanization, all these things increased production methods to make food more available to people. Third, training. We can give all the food that we can grow, but it's not going to help the country sustain itself. So training the local and commercial farmers and getting them to go from, again, local farms, which are necessary, also to potentially commercial farms, again, as Sarah Menker spoke of. So taught them research methods, agronomic production. Very skeptical. All these people are very skeptical. Here's a picture of Norman Borlaug showing the Mexican people. Of course, the increased, I mean, that is just really thick right here compared to what they had before. So getting farmers to trust the scientist. Extension agents do this all the time. Farmers who've been doing this day in, day out have their ways sometimes, and they get set. And it might work for them to the detriment, though, possibly of the environment, or they have disease or things that they just don't know how to handle. And so there are a lot of options today in the seed sciences and breeding, and just getting farmers to listen to extension officers, assuming then that the research we have to date anyway is the best information available. So Norman Borlaug was the one who brought this on. 1970, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. You need to watch this video. Again, fast forward through this one, through mine, as I just go through the slides and get to this video. So you have heard of him if you paused or watched the video above for a moment, and then watch this one, his passion. It's about an 8-minute video, and it's about Norman Borlaug's life, his coupling his knowledge with his passion and relentless pursuit. You can see his stance here when you click on his lecture, which I will do right now. Whoops, maybe not. Let's see. There we are. And I just want to go through a couple paragraphs here. It's loading up. Of Norman Borlaug's lecture when he received the 1970 Nobel Prize for his efforts in saving millions of people. You won't be able to see all of it because my screen is cut off, it appears. But I want to pick up. The recognition that hunger and social strife are linked is not new, for it is evidenced by the Old Testament passage, and it shall come to pass that when they shall be hungry, they shall fret themselves and curse their king and their God. I mean, people, you've seen this before in riots. I mean, they loot, they hoard. I mean, after a natural disaster, it's neighbor for their neighbor. But if that natural disaster doesn't get Red Cross or Salvation Army or aid quickly, they really begin to turn in on themselves. And it's a scary situation. Perhaps no one in recent times has more pungently expressed the interrelationship of food and peace than Nobel laureate Lord John Boyd Orr, the great crusader against hunger and the first Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization. With his famous words, "You can't build peace on empty stomachs." These simple words of wisdom, spoken 21 years ago, are as valid today as when they were spoken. They will become even more meaningful in the future as world population skyrockets and as crowding social pressures and stresses increase. To ignore Lord Orr's admonition would result in worldwide disorders and social chaos, for it is a fundamental biological law that when the life of living organisms are threatened by shortage of food, they tend to swarm and use violence to obtain their means of sustenance. There are two worlds that we exist in, the speech goes on, the privileged world and the forgotten world. We have the affluent in the developed nations, comprising 25 to 30% of the world population. And then we have everyone else outside the Garden of Eden. So, here's some more words from that speech. I will not read to you. I wanted to read those so you can go through here. But that was all from the speech of Norman Borlaug when he was given the Nobel Prize for Peace. Oops, there we go. So go through the rest of these. I'm really want you to see that. I think it's a really inspiring video. I think both these videos on the Green Revolution, the war against hunger, as well as Norman Borlaug's life and contributions can really inspire us to use our knowledge, our power where we're at to see a need. You know, I read articles, you know, we heard off topic here of Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, and we know that there's mafia issues, we know that there's a sex trade, we know that there's a drug problem, we know there's a lot of things that are wrong, that deserve attention, that deserve social justice. There's wrongs that need to be righted. But a society and a civilization without food, the poverty, or an end in poverty, are left helpless. This is something that everybody can do. I read those headlines and I wish I could say, I wish I could do, I want to put a stop to it, and it's just very difficult in that crime world, but food is something that most of us do have the power to help with. If we put just a little time and effort behind the situation, we could really look out for each other's neighbors. Africa and the Green Revolution. So go through, look at this data. I don't want to take too much more of my time. I see I'm at 20 minutes. I don't like to make these much more than 20. But look at the data, what it's showing over the years and the tons per hectare being produced. Everyone has had somewhat since then a green revolution of their own for their various crops. Origin. Africa and the Green Revolution. Africa lacked several factors that allowed the Green Revolution to succeed in Asia and Latin America. There was no infrastructure, remember, roads and access, education, price supports, farmer credit, businesses to sell these inputs, healthy soil. You do have to have arable land, and it seems India still has some arable land. Africa is going to desertification, which is a topic we'll talk about in coming lectures. It's just very hard to grow there. But they have a lot of acreage that could be converted if we have the right knowledge and right research on how to convert that soil and that land into usable crop growing land. China is about tapped out. They've grown a lot. They can increase yields and quality, but as far as land available to them, there's not a lot left for China. So they're in a really dire situation right now. Africa and the Green Revolution. Here we are. Sorry. So here's another picture of Norman Borlaug and such. What we're in need of possibly now is another green revolution. So there are, can't find out where to put this. There are skeptics. There are critics of the green revolution because of what it's done to the environment. It hasn't totally destroyed it, but it's definitely depleting. We do see soil erosion. We do see our water supply dwindling. We do see toxins in the water and just unusable areas of land and waste. So now we just have another challenge ahead of us. Maybe another green revolution is needed. But introduction of new crops to bring variety to our diet, higher yields, improved water and nitrogen use efficiency, natural resources protection, increased profitability for small farms. There are ways all these things can be done, and the answers are in your hands. Are we at a yield plateau? Have we hit the best that we can do? Some think in America, a different lecture, we have. While we make the most efficient use so far, it's not thought possibly that we might be able to go up any higher. In wheat, maize, which is corn, rice, we seem to be almost at the top of what we're able to produce. When you go to this PowerPoint, you'll be able to see all the rest. So I'll leave you with this. If the naysayers do manage to stop agricultural biotechnology, they might actually precipitate the famines and the crises of global biodiversity they have been predicting for nearly 40 years. What are we saying? This is, of course, in support of biotech and the Green Revolution, which is a system Norman Borlaug, of course, incorporated and used as his primary source for saving lives. It's thought that we're killing ourselves by killing the environment, and what he's saying, well, if we don't do it, we will anyway by killing off the population in the next 40 years. Very interesting. Was the Green Revolution a good thing then? Well, it did save 1 billion lives, but it increased use of nitrogen and water. It encouraged production of cash crops and enabled continued population growth, which is, for some people, the very root of the problem. We can't control population. We can't. I mean, America sends a lot of money to Mexico. We send a lot of condoms. We send a lot of birth control methods. So that other countries stop having kids. You know, that's political, and that comes into religious beliefs as well, and personal freedoms. Right or wrong, that's what's happening right now in order to control this. But, you know, I think feeding the people is a good thing to do. Okay, I'm going to stop being so mechanical here, and thank you for listening. And like always, have a good day.